And I found that every company had a requirement for your GPA. And I always found like there are some amazing developers in my own batch, including my co-founder Hari, who's like a super smart guy, but he never was in the cutoff. The greatest hackers are rebels, or maybe like it's even true for entrepreneurs. But the InterviewStreet idea was born out of, okay, there are like really good, talented people. How can we help them prepare? How can we help them showcase to companies that they're really good?
Any individual or team's capability is like a rubber band.
Yeah.
When you start stretching it, only then you realize that how much it can stretch.
Yeah.
And I think YC like environments pushes you to stretch that, test it out, that how much you can do as a team.
Yeah. People put limits on themselves, and usually that limit is probably 10 times more than what you think it is. And don't self-select out. The interview process needs to resemble as much as your real work, because that would be the best proxy. Hire for strength, but not lack of weakness. Every person has a large flaw. The key is like, what is a superpower? We think about the future as human plus AI.
Welcome to the latest episode of SkillerPod. We have Vivek with us today, founder of HackerRank. Given most of you, audience of this podcast, are either in tech or in startup building, HackerRank and Vivek, of course, need no introduction. They have, in a way, defined and shaped how tech hiring is done, how to make it scalable, how to make it more objective. And it has been a good 15-year-long journey, Vivek.
I think it's 14, but go on.
14, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what would be very interesting is for us to learn from you how it all evolved, right? I'm sure in this 15 years figuring out signals that who are the people who would end up performing as a high quality engineer in the companies, working closely with the largest organizations in the world and trying to build that process. To begin with, and because in a way we are meeting in person for the first time, but we have known each other for probably decades. So to begin with, I remember back in 2009 when you folks were still in college or just graduating, you all had built InterviewStreet.
Yeah.
I remember trying that out when I was in college as well, as a computer science student.
Nice.
And then, let's start with that what was the problem that you all were trying to solve back in 2009 when you were building InterviewStreet, and what were the learnings from there?
Yeah, so a lot of things. I think in college, I used to do predominantly two things. One was programming, the other one was making movies. And
Sorry, making movies, not watching movies.
No, making
That's
movies.
new. So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I still want to. I still write scripts on the side and all of those things. I might like planning to produce like a short film kind of a thing.
Interesting.
And so the business aspect was never in play. So I was like thinking, okay, I might mostly just like become a developer at an organization and work there, or if things work out, we can actually go and like make a movie or something. So I was the placement coordinator in my college, and the job of a placement coordinator is you invite companies, you coordinate when they are on your campus, you make sure that people are getting prepared and all of those things. And I found that every company had a requirement for your GPA. It was like 7 or 7.5. It was one of those things. If it's like it'll be 7.5 with no arrears, 7.5 with this kind of projects and things in those lines. And I always found like there are some amazing developers in my own batch, including my co-founder Hari, who's like a super smart guy, but he never was in the cutoff. I hope he won't mind when I'm actually sharing that. Like, he's probably the smartest guy that a hacker that I know of.
Well, I think Prasanna was in your batch as well. Prasanna from Rippling.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I'm not sure, but I don't think he had a great
GPA as well. Yeah, I'm not sure of his GPA. Yeah, but it's very ironic, right? Like, so it's almost like the greatest hackers are rebels, or maybe like it's even true for entrepreneurs in some sense. Indeed. Like you have a rebel. And by the way, it's not like purposely they flunked their exams or whatever. It was just when you spend most of your time in labs and like programming and things in those lines, it's never really going to your academics is all certainly will take a hit. And I noticed this pattern in all companies because it almost became like, hey, that is the best proxy for me to determine if you're a really good developer or not. And turns out that there are other signals that you can get. So that was probably the germ of the idea in
Mhm.
terms of like, hey, how can we help solve this in a better way? And we actually had a I even hesitate to call it a product. It was really a website.
Mhm.
We had this website called as Job Affair,
Mhm.
and the idea behind that was essentially. I know this sounds like very whatever odd or something, but this was our thinking like 15 years back. So don't judge me too much on this. But whenever you're looking for a job, it feels like you're cheating on your company. Uh, you're not telling your manager that you're interviewing,
Mhm.
but you are. You're
Mhm.
probably having blocks in your calendar where like it says work, but essentially like
Mhm.
you're going to go and interview. You're also
Mhm.
preparing for the interview on
Mhm.
the company's time and things in those
Mhm.
lines. So
Mhm.
we thought like, hey, this certainly feels like an affair
Enough. Okay,
that you're doing.
interesting.
So we had our first thing called as Job Affair, which is
Mhm.
like, hey, how can we help you find the job,
Mhm.
even though you're working
Mhm.
on it, using like skills.
Right.
How can you actually showcase your skills
Right.
and find that.
Right.
Um, I think the name caught on, and we actually presented in a business plan. We actually won that business contest, and that gave me a little bit of an aha of
Mhm.
like, wow, this is really cool. This is really interesting. So maybe
Right.
maybe there is something here,
Right.
and then we started to work on like some ideas, and that was the creation of what we call as Interview Street.
Mhm.
But I think like the way we started Interview Street was very very different. It was we chucked the whole job affair stuff
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it was frankly done as like a little bit of a gimmick or a
Yeah.
show.
Sure.
We just want to put it out there
Right.
like, hey,
Right.
this is like a cool
Right.
concept, cool
Right.
idea, and like we got like 10,000 rupees or something
Mhm.
like that. We won the business plan contest. But the Interview Street idea was born out of, okay, there are like really good talented people.
Mhm.
How can we help them prepare? How
Mhm.
can we help them showcase to companies that they're really good?
Right.
So that's how we got started. Yeah.
Very interesting. And then Interview Street, and then there was a switch over from Interview Street to HackerRank. And
Yeah.
in some ways, what you were doing at Interview Street was also quite different from what you eventually evolved into.
Yeah,
Uh,
Interview Street started as a mock interview platform. So effectively, the way it worked was, if you had an interview with an Amazon or Google or something, you could come onto our site. We'll have a set of interviewers who are capable enough
right.
to conduct a mock interview.
Right.
So I think the student will pay 300 rupees,
Mm-hmm.
and the interviewer will get 250,
Sure.
and then 50 rupees goes to our pocket, um, minus all whatever tax and all of those
Right.
things. And I still remember we had this beautiful Excel that projected us to get like $1 million of revenue in like 2 years. We made 4,000 rupees. That's when I realized the magic of Excel. You can do anything in Excel. All you need to do is just put a formula and drag the cells across. It massively failed, and it failed for many reasons.
Mhm.
And probably a confluence of factors. By the way, that idea may succeed right now
Right.
in a different form.
We'll talk
Because
about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
so that's how it started. We worked on it for 18 months, was not going anywhere, and yeah, then we moved. We switched to HackerRank.
Mm-hmm.
We had the same core belief though. The
Mm-hmm.
core ethos was the same,
Mm-hmm.
which is skills over pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't exactly coin that
Right.
way, or we didn't like formalize it in that particular in that particular term, but that was the core.
Right.
Like, put your skills over pedigree.
Right.
Interview Street was a way for you to train people to get better at
Mm-hmm.
interviews. HackerRank, then we decided, okay, if students are not willing to pay and they
Right.
don't have a lot of money anyway,
Right.
why don't you just like build something for companies that will help them highlight people who are really good?
Right.
So it was the same ethos done in a different way.
Right. Very interesting. And in HackerRank, what I see is that in a way it has democratized access to high quality jobs to everyone.
Yeah.
Like I remember when you graduated, I believe in 2008,
Hmm.
we in 2010. Back then, when you look at any of the top companies, the Microsoft or the Googles or the Facebooks of the world, they would, of course, they cannot interview, tens of thousands of people. So they would have to limit themselves to just few top institutions and maybe interview few folks there.
Yeah.
And then a platform like HackerRank democratizes that now there's a infinitely scalable way
Yeah.
for you to screen everyone,
Yeah.
and then you can interview folks who are, say, in top 1% irrespective of where they come from.
Yeah.
When you all started building HackerRank, Was this a thought, or was this an impact that got created uh, as a side effect?
Yeah. I think I don't know. Maybe it was Sam Altman who said this or someone else, which is you certainly need to start with a very strong mission or the
Yeah,
purpose,
yeah,
but not a lot of founders have that well formed initially.
right,
I mean,
right, of
it was
course.
always like it's something like, hey, I think it is cool. Like, why don't you
Right,
actually put it out there?
right,
And then as you start to build, I think the purpose starts to soak in deeply. And over time, I think you're really working, or you're really working for that purpose, or
right,
you're really serving the purpose.
right.
So initially it was, I think this needs to exist in the world.
Hmm.
I think this is a cool idea. I think it's resonating. But I think over the years, when you see like stories of people who have
Right,
no traditional computer science background
right,
getting a job, or moms who have been out of work for 8 years,
right.
who have been like sort of screened out in resume because like, hey, you haven't like worked for the last 8 years but being able to get a job
Right,
because they have like a HackerRank credential. All
right,
of those things are inspiring stories for us to
right,
like continue the journey on.
right. No, I think it's very like as you rightly put, and as a founder who have been operating for 14 years,
Yeah.
that the bigger mission is always very important for you to keep going.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it evolves.
Yeah.
It's not one big grand vision that you
Yeah.
start with one on day zero.
For sure. Yeah.
Right,
And I think that's true for everyone. There's no way that Jeff Bezos had
right,
AWS in his
of
roadmap
course.
or like vision
Right,
when you
right,
actually started, or like the way that the AI industry is changing, your roadmap is evolving very rapidly.
right,
That but I think there is a balance. You do need to have like a pretty good idea of the vision and like some of the building blocks that you need to
right,
get there.
right,
So but it will look hazier in the future, but you
right,
do need to have like a direction in terms of like, here
right,
are all some of the things that will actually work in place.
right, right. Now let's come back to the journey, right? That you all started like there was a hunch that something like HackerRank need to
Yeah.
exist. You built it out, um, and then I think you were one of the very early companies who got into YC.
Yeah.
In my head, probably were you the first? I'm not
Yeah, the
sure. I
first
think you
Indian
were the first
company.
Indian company
Yeah. Yeah, to get into Y
that
Combinator. Yeah.
participated in Y Combinator.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. And back then, I'm sure Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, you all would have
Yeah.
worked closely with them all.
Yeah.
Tell us about
That's
that.
certainly one of the high moments in my life, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. We've all grown up reading Paul Graham's essays.
Right.
Y Combinator was like really a dream, and never really thought we'd actually get there. And we applied. Actually, we applied first with the InterviewStreet idea.
Mm-hmm.
We got turned down,
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason I stored that screenshot. Like, we don't have, I mean, like, I don't have the Vivek at interviewstreet.com email ID, but the only email that I have is the Y Combinator rejection one. For some reason, that night when I got when I received the rejection email, it was one of those things of, I don't think, I think we will get there, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
take the screenshot so
Mm-hmm.
that, like, later on I can show that like we
Oh
actually
wow.
got there. It was very odd. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling should have been upset, and you're like depressed or
That's
whatever,
interesting.
but it was more inspiring, like, hey, I'm going to
Right.
take this and make this happen. So that's literally the only email that I have from the interviewstreet.com. And then, like, the next time we applied,
Mm-hmm.
we did get a call, and that was my first trip to the Bay Area. So flew in like a 20-hour flight, for a 10-minute interview, and then I see a panel of Paul Graham, Paul Bouquet, the founder of
Mm-hmm.
Gmail, Sam Altman,
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, who's also the
Right.
co-founder of Y Combinator,
Right.
and Harj,
Mm-hmm.
who was a partner there.
Right.
And and I've read about these people. Madame Tussauds, the
Of
wax.
course. Yeah, yeah.
It was like that.
Oh.
It was like that in real life. Wow,
Right.
like, so I've seen videos of them. I've been inspired by their writing, and this was like Madame Tussauds, except it's real. These are real people, and I have 10 minutes to prove that like you should actually take me for the job. And interestingly, like, I couldn't get Hari.
Mhm.
Hari's visa got rejected. So I was the only one. And like, as you probably know, Y Combinator places a very high emphasis on co-founders. They
Right, of
really
course.
want
Yeah,
co-founders to
yeah.
be in. And I think PG asked, so where is Hari? I said, he got his visa rejected. And he said, like, do you know we care a lot about co-founders? And I told him, Paul, if you give me the Y Combinator admit, I will make sure that Hari swims across the Pacific Ocean and comes here. And I think that really people laughed. And PG said, okay, determination is one thing, but don't do anything illegal. And I don't know if that played a part. I think that would have played a part in them like saying yes, because I do think like
Yeah.
determination was is one of the things that I've
Right.
realized over time more than IQ or
No,
smartness to continue
100%,
to work there.
100%. I think even you taking a screenshot of the interview street is also a signal of that.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'd say like going back, that was a little bit I don't know, a little bit brash, naive,
Yeah.
however you want to talk that about on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
screenshot
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah.
But this whole 10 minutes was like an amazing experience for me. It was certainly one of the high moments in my life, and I think the reason, if I look back, and by the way, it's always like hard to say what exactly happened. Your brain tries to reconstruct stories in the
Right.
past, so we
Right.
always
Sure.
need to
Of
like think
course.
about it in a little bit
Yeah.
of that bias
Yeah.
of I did not think we'll get in,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was very free. I
Mm-hmm.
just answered it as is, and it was probably one of the truest 10-minute moment of Vivek.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually my learning, that you should try and be your true
Right.
self as
Right.
much as possible,
Right.
because it was one of those things. They've never taken an Indian company.
Right.
Hari is not here.
Right.
Um, yeah, so and I'm like sitting in awe for the first 30 seconds, not even knowing what questions they're asking. But it was like, okay, just like be yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, very interesting. Tell us about after that. What was the like? How was the experience working with these folks during? I think they run this 2 month cohort, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
they run like a 3 month
3 month cohort.
cohort,
Yeah.
and then you have the demo day.
Right.
I'm still in touch with with the partners, with Harj,
Mm-hmm.
with Paul, with PG. I actually
Mm-hmm.
met PG after like a decade for like 2 hours at his home.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the most. It was the best 2 hours that,
Yeah.
that I've spent, and in the recent times, so inspiring. Like when you talk to PG, so inspiring.
Right.
He's
He's
very
he's
direct.
based in London, all right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
based in London, but he does like come to Bay
I
Area
see.
during
Okay.
like demo days and
Got it.
things on those lines. So one time he was here,
Mm-hmm.
he invited me to his house, and yeah, it was one of the best 2 hours. He's very he's very direct,
Mm.
which is good
No,
because
I
you
think
want this to be.
that's a habit with most
Yeah,
high performance people.
yeah.
Yeah.
But direct also in like a little bit of a has like a sense of humor in
Right.
his directness that you can
Right.
actually see,
Right.
and very inspiring in terms of the advice. So Y Combinator was very intense for those 3 months, but it's one of the best learning, one of the steep learning curves that I've
Right.
had. And also there was like a real forcing function. The demo day was a real forcing function because you needed to show enough progress
Yeah.
that you can put yourself in front of investors who are ready to write your first check.
Right.
So whether that is your first 10 paying customers or like first 100 users or whatever it is, you need to make progress. So that was a real forcing function. And by the way, there was also a forcing function every week, because every week they used to invite sort of celebrity entrepreneurs to give a talk. This was
Mm-hmm.
Max Levchin to Mark Andreessen to Peter Thiel and all of that. And more than the talk, it was the fact that you're now going to meet all of your peers every week,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of envy. Oh man, like this guy like progressed a lot last week, and
Yeah.
I'm like sitting here. At least for me,
Right.
it was
Right.
like that. So there was like a constant forcing function every week,
Right.
culminating in this big demo day
Right.
that just like pushed you to continue to make progress.
Right. And I think it also gives you a realization that how much you can do in every single
True,
week, every
true.
single day.
Yeah,
And just 3 months in one way is not a
yeah,
long time, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like just 3 months.
Yeah, I think like
Uh,
Elon Musk tweets this, right? Like if you think it's going to take 3 months, it's going to take 3 months. If
right.
it's going to take 3 days, it's going to take 3 days.
Right.
Of course, there's some limit in that.
Of course.
What is this thing called? It's called some uh, work expands to fill time.
To fill time. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
I forgot the name of the person who has actually
Yeah.
said that.
No,
That's
and I think similar thing is that it's any individual or team's capability is like a rubber band.
yeah,
You only when you start stretching it, only then you realize that how much it can stretch.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think YC like environments pushes you to stretch that, test it out, that
yeah,
how much you can do as a team.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I think like they also talk about resourcefulness,
right.
right? Which I think is is an interesting adjective, or a way to even describe high performing people. The ability for you to get something done. Like I
Right.
mean, if I think about uh, one of my sort of friends, Blake, who's running Boom,
Mm-hmm.
the
Oh, wow.
supersonic
Oh,
jet.
lovely. Okay.
Uh,
Blake was also part of YC long
yeah,
back. Yeah,
he was part,
correct,
not
correct.
not our batch, but
Yeah.
in a different batch. I mean, just think about it. You needed to make enough progress from the start within 3 months to put in front of investors. You can't just say like,
Right.
prototype and things like that. By the way,
Right.
that progress was getting a deal.
Right.
And there was a story, I don't remember the exact details, where he called up Richard Branson, who's certainly much more of a entrepreneur friendly. Let me actually go and make it happen. And I think he struck a deal with Virgin Airlines before the demo day. And if you just think about it, like let's say you didn't have the pressure of demo day and things. Hey, I'm building a jet.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
sure. It will
first
take a
quarter
decade.
plan is to build the architecture or something. Like no, dude. Like the first quarter is like you got to like go and get a deal, even though your jet is not live.
Yeah,
I mean, like, and then like you see like resourcefulness coming into play.
yeah.
So I think it certainly has like a very strong the forcing function like certainly pushes you to
Right.
find out ways. And I think work expands to fill time is a
True.
very valid
True.
adage.
Yeah. No, and I think Blake's story is also very interesting in the on the resourcefulness side. That he was a product manager at Groupon,
Yeah,
building an e-commerce company.
yeah,
And then he says that, I can solve a supersonic flights. I can
yeah,
make supersonic
yeah,
passenger
yeah,
jets.
yeah,
And he has ended up doing it as well.
yeah, yeah,
Now his first,
yeah.
I think it took the first flight just few days back.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way,
just,
like he also has like a flight instructor license and things like that.
mm,
Y Combinator also has another cohort called YC Growth. I
mhm,
think that's where like Blake and I were in the same
got it.
YC Growth cohort. That's when
Got
I
it.
got to know him a little more. But yeah, as much as like it's a little bit of a media hype story, although it is true. Hey, PM from Groupon, like this one, which is very inspiring. The guy is like a flight
Oh, yes.
aviation person, like
Enthusiastic.
enthusiast, and
Mm-hmm,
like had like a license and all of
mm-hmm,
those things. Yeah.
got it. Um, so that's on YC. And then let's talk about the life after YC,
Yeah.
right? That how did, and actually, I would ask a more personal question, that how did YC experience change you as a person?
Yeah.
Whatever impact it had on the company, of course, that's visible to the world, but how did that change you as a founder?
it the core thing I realized was I should not self select out myself for things
Mm-hmm.
right from the start of Y Combinator. I
Mm-hmm.
think I self-selected out,
Mm-hmm.
but um, thankfully it worked out well,
Yeah.
because like the way that I even went into the Y Combinator interview was, oh, I don't think I'm going to get here, or the way that I thought like there's no way that I'm going to get my first paying customer within like 90 days, and we got Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Back then it was called Facebook.
Yeah, I remember
And
that. Yeah. I think
y-
at that time Anshuman was also in Facebook,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
were,
maybe Anshuman
I
even
think you
like
were crushing at their place when you were meeting Facebook.
was it.
I recall that.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I yeah, that might be true. That may be true. Yeah, that may be true. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe Anshuman even got his job at Facebook. I mean, although he could have gotten, in all companies were vying to get him. Maybe he took like a HackerRank test or something. But yeah, like you never thought like you would actually get like a paying customer within the first 90
Yeah.
days, and that you would actually get Facebook. It
Yeah.
actually taught that you people put limits on themselves, and usually that limit is probably 10 times more than what you think it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
and don't self-select out. I think that
Right.
was like the key thing, but it starts to fade away after
Right.
you get out of the Y Combinator, and so you
Mm.
need like a constant reminder to say
Mm.
like don't self-select yourself
Yeah.
out, don't put limits, or even if you're going to put limits, like just know that it's 10 times greater than what you think it is.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, like fueling ambition is a almost like a noble cause, and I think Y
Yeah.
Combinator does that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting and inspiring as well.
Yeah.
And I think that in a way tells that the reason why the company is coming out of YC, and even statistically, not just individual instances, but as a cohort, have been performing so well.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think like the cohort percentage success and outliers and stuff still remain the same in
of
in a
course, yeah,
YC bucket. Like
yeah,
I think like I don't know what the stat is. My guess is like more than half of them don't make it,
right,
and like 1% or 2% of companies like contribute to the
right,
90% of them. There's
right,
certainly
right.
the tail distribution there in terms of
Very true,
outlier.
right,
But I think it just, yeah, I mean, like fueling ambition, I think is like a noble cause, and I
right,
think that's at the core of what Y Combinator does to founders.
right, right. No, and in some ways, HackerRank does the same
Yeah,
to individuals. That
yeah,
like it doesn't matter where you come from.
yeah,
You can achieve big things in
yeah,
life,
yeah, absolutely.
right? Superb. Now let's carry on to the journey, right?
Yeah,
There's so much to talk about.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, the life post YC.
Mm-hmm.
What was the next bigger milestone that you see in the life
Yeah.
post YC?
One of the things I remember telling Hari was, over time, hey, all we need to do is to get into Y Combinator, and then all our problems will be solved. And then after YC, I said, all we need to do is like crush the demo day and get the investment, and then all our problems will be solved. And then like I told him, hey, all we need to do is get to 1 million ARR, and I think like all of our problems will be solved. And then I think I've been saying that for like 10 years.
Did your parents also tell you that get great marks in 10th class and all your life will be sorted, and
Yeah, like
get selected
yeah, an
in
equivalent of that. I
get
mean,
into
like
an IT Tirchi and your life will be sorted?
yeah, probably IIT. I didn't get into IIT, but like yeah, some version of that, right? I mean, like I grew up in a standard middle class family where it was one of those things of yeah, get good grades, get into IIT,
Right,
or get into IIM or whatever
right.
the equivalent colleges, and everything will be sorted. And yeah, I think at some point, maybe 2018, 2019, I stopped telling this to Hari. He said like, hey dude, like every year you say this, and then the next year is like something new. So life post YC was, I mean, again, like you go into the next milestone. Okay, you need to get your first round of financing. You need to like start to, okay, you got like 10 paying customers. How do you actually get to 100 paying customers? And it was it had this, it still had the big rush. And we got our first investment from Khosla Ventures. Vinod Khosla led the round. That was also a little bit of a fanboy moment.
Of
I
course, yeah.
think Hari and I, so in NIT Trichy, there used to be this lab called a Sun Lab. Uh, um, so there used to be a lot of different labs,
Mhm.
and everything had Windows operating systems. So Sun Lab was the only one that had either Solaris OS
Mhm.
or any of the distributions of Linux,
Got it.
whether it was Fedora
Mhm.
or Ubuntu and
Mhm.
things. And the and there are only a handful of people in Sun Lab, like 4 or 5, because you turn it on, you have a black terminal, and like half the people didn't know what to do with the black terminal. But then like the curious hackers were like, oh, what is this black terminal? Let me actually go and play around with it. So that's actually where like I met Hari.
Mhm.
We used to have this acronym LRSL, last row
Mhm.
of Sun Lab. And like Prasanna was also there as
Oh, very
part of that. Like
interesting.
there were a
Yeah.
bunch of people there in
Uh-huh.
that one. And so again, like we used to discuss a lot. We used to discuss about programming, about whatever we thought was life back then, like because we used to work late in the night. And one of the nights I remember, hey, so when you think about like companies in India, you think about TCS, you think about Reliance, you think about like big manufacturing companies, which are all like giant organizations. uh, but then like the companies that you aspire to work for were like Google, were like at that time Facebook was starting to like come up, Apple. And and then there was always this question of, hey, why is there, and everyone had like a little bit of a common connect of like you were either in Stanford or like you were in Palo Alto, you're in
Right.
the Bay Area.
Right.
And there was always a question of, hey, why isn't there like a company like that in
Mhm.
India, which is the
Mhm.
kind of company that I aspire to work for.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, wait, I've been spending all my time in Sun Lab. Who's the founder of Sun? And then I looked at it, and there was an Indian. And it was like an aha moment for me. And I still remember that distinct
Mhm.
moment. It was like
Mhm.
3 a.m. or whatever,
Mhm.
to say, wow, so you can be an Indian, like in Delhi,
Yeah.
go to America and build this company. Although we weren't using much of Solaris OS,
Mhm.
but it was
Mhm.
called the Sun Lab.
Yeah.
And so when I met Vinod for the first time, I actually told the story to him, like,
Mhm.
this is a little bit of a fanboy
Mhm.
moment. So
Mhm.
I'll just don't judge me on my first 10 minutes, and then like you can judge me my pitch deck on the remaining 50 minutes. And yeah, so that was a really good moment. And he's been we've had like like any relationship, there's always like ups and
Right.
downs and things,
Right.
but like overall, he's been a great mentor. He's pushed
Right.
me to be a better entrepreneur overall.
Right. I think that's also very interesting. Vinod is very Vinod Khosla is very famous to also be very direct, very
Yeah,
to the point.
yeah.
To some extent, very contrarian views he has on how world is gonna evolve. Uh, what have been your biggest experience where he really challenged you that
Yeah,
this is how maybe you should see the world?
yeah, I think he has this maxim. I'm probably going to paraphrase, or maybe this is the actual one. I prefer brutal honesty to hypocritical politeness.
Hmm.
And I think it's a very well said one. Um, yeah, because like hypocritical politeness is what you say, even though you know that this
Yeah,
person is not going to make it.
yeah,
You actually say like, "Oh yeah, good job, like
yeah,
keep going," but
yeah,
you're actually hurting the entrepreneur in
yeah,
this one.
yeah.
Um, Somebody said it. I don't know who said this. Like, reality is an undefeated champion,
Yeah.
and it's always very hard to see the reality. So when you think about like Vinod, and I think the place where he comes from is, look, as an entrepreneur, you're pouring your life into this,
Right.
and you're probably sacrificing a bunch. You're spending like 80, 90 hours of work. and let's make sure that we can increase the odds of success.
Yeah.
And so somebody has to tell you, dude, this is wrong. This is BS. Like you've hired the wrong person, or this
Yeah.
market strategy is not going to work.
Yeah.
And in fact, like going to even a level extreme, if you don't say that, you're not doing a favor. You're actually making it worse for the
Right.
entrepreneur who's pouring all their life
Right.
in making it happen. Why don't you say what you think?
Right.
It's actually going to help them. It's
Yeah.
going to increase the odds of
Yeah.
success.
Yeah.
He's challenged me in many ways. He's challenged me in thinking about what should be what thinking about like the exec hires. He gets involved in like whenever I hire an executive
Mhm.
in some capacity, whether
Mhm.
it's interviewing or
Mhm.
selling or like, hey, tell me who you're
Mhm.
hiring for.
Mhm.
I'd love to do some back channels and things. So in the hiring piece, he's also gotten involved in terms of a lot of things in terms of pushing.
Mhm.
One of the things that I really liked about him is, well, the question that I liked in the growth aspect was, he'd say something like, anytime I ask a team, what does it take for you to double? The standard answer that you would get is, oh, I need 2x the headcount, or I need 2x the
Mhm.
marketing budget,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
But then if I ask the question of what does it take for you to do 10x next year,
Mhm.
you never come back and say like, I need 10 times the people, I
Yeah.
need 10 times the marketing budget.
Yeah.
You're actually pushing, and this goes back to the resourcefulness. You're
Yeah.
trying to like figure out ways to make that happen,
Right.
because you know that like you can't hire 10 times the people, but you need to get to 10x.
Right.
So there's a lot of aspect in terms of the team that I've built. He's pushed, challenged the growth plans, the way that to think about the market and strategy. He's like I mean, like AI is now like big. He's been talking about AI right from the day we got an investment in. He's been like pushing a lot on like machine learning. This is going to be the big one. So certainly foresaw that quite a bit. Yeah, those are all different aspects.
Very interesting. And I think with this, I can relate that some elements of what Silicon Valley has different,
Yeah,
which leads to creation of so many, hyper growth, large scale
yeah,
tech companies.
yeah,
Right. I think in a way, a little bit of this culture and the directness.
yeah.
To some extent, I think we Indians are culturally not fully attuned to that
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. I don't know how much
Uh,
viral this particular clip is going to go. I don't want it to be like a cultural thing. By the way, Vinod Khosla is an Indian,
yeah, yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
and he's very direct. So,
yeah.
I don't think it's a cultural thing, and I
Uh-huh.
don't even think maybe there's a little bit truth to the Bay Area versus India kind of a setup.
Yeah.
But again, like I wouldn't even like generalize this that all Bay Area investors are like
Are
brutally
direct. Yeah.
honest
Mm-hmm.
versus being hypocritically polite. In fact, like that's a minority,
Yeah.
and like and I try my best to seek advice from them, like
Mm-hmm.
go and get in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I do have access to a couple of
Right.
them,
Right.
luck, whatever work that I did. But I wouldn't even say it's like a general characteristic that you would find across the board.
Got it. So you are saying that even in Bay Area, everyone is not
Yeah,
probably
yeah, yeah,
direct. Yeah.
absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. It's only the
So,
outliers, and
so the polite hypocrisy
yeah,
is still a
uh,
flavor
yeah,
in Bay
yeah.
Area as well.
Yeah, and there are lots of reasons for that, I guess. Lots of reasons for that, like
Of course, people don't want to
yeah,
offend,
you don't
and
want to
yeah, yeah,
offend. There's
absolutely.
there's this really good book called Lying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very short book.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 50 pages by
Mm-hmm.
Sam Harris.
Mm-hmm.
It actually talks about like how it's a very fun book. You should probably check it out. I don't want to spoil, but maybe just a little bit of a glimpse is how you even like lie on a normal basis without even you realizing.
Without even realizing
Uh,
it. Yeah.
hey, how are you doing? Maybe you had a bad day. What do you say? Like, oh, I'm good.
I'm all
Like,
right.
you
Yeah.
keep going on it.
Right.
By the way, it also talks about like when you should just like ignore, when you
Right.
should actually talk about it. Like, what if somebody actually gives you a gift,
Right.
a book, and you just like hated that book? What do you say? Oh, thank you so much, and you just like politely
Right.
move on. So there are lots of places where it talks about, and it actually gives you confidence how not to
Right.
lie. It's
Right.
like a very short book that you
Right.
can check out.
Right.
And the core thing is, yeah, you don't want to offend the other
Right.
person.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we're all like social, cohesive people.
Right. I would, however, probe on one thing that in terms of output, I think it's undeniable that the Bay Area, while of course Bangalore is fantastic, a lot of fantastic startups being built here, and Bay Area on the other hand, of course, have and like there's some ways in which Bay Area continues producing, higher volume, higher quality companies than India. What in your observation, because you in a way get to see both the sides, right? What in your observations are the key inputs to that?
I think it's changing a lot.
No, of course.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah.
changing a lot. In fact,
No
like
doubt about
the
that.
amount of energy that I see here, I've been in Bangalore for the last 3 months, working closely with the team here. The energy is electric here,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
just in HackerRank, but like just the interactions, the
yeah, yeah,
conversations, the kind of companies that
yeah.
people are building here. It's pretty amazing. Like I think we saw Paras Chopra from Wingify.
Of course, yeah,
More than the exit,
yeah.
it's the level of ambition that he's
No,
actually
indeed,
taking on.
indeed.
Like, hey, how can
Yeah,
we actually build a
yeah,
foundational model with a
yeah,
completely different
yeah,
architecture from India?
yeah.
I think the level of ambition is there. I think if you look at it, uh, if you were to even like uh, do the lineage
Have
of
you met Paras recently, by the way?
no, I've actually never met him, but
Okay,
like him and I have exchanged
sure,
on Twitter and
sure.
all of that. Never really met
Paras,
him
we
in
had
person.
Paras here just
Yeah.
some time back, and
Okay.
of course, what he is, like what people are generally talking more about is what he has done already.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what is more exciting for me, what he's planning to do ahead.
Yeah. No, that's what
Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm
yeah,
saying. Yeah, in terms of like level of ambition, like
yeah,
you could certainly go and
yeah,
start another like to do app or whatever,
yeah.
but like to go ahead and build a new kind of a foundational model coming from India.
Right,
And again, like it has the same risk reward of a startup.
yeah,
The odds of success is going to be like a single digit percentage, but if it's actually going to work, it's going to be
yeah,
dramatically
yeah,
different in terms of trajectory. Um, so I think, but if you were to trace the evolution of even like the types of companies here, and I haven't done that history evolution for Bay Area, but like at least for India, like if you look at like Tatas of the world, there was this heavy reliance on manufacturing.
yeah,
Um, no pun intended. Reliance was also starting in like manufacturing,
yeah,
and then we started to get more and more towards sort of services. In IT was like services organizations. You had like the Tata Consultancy, which was also like a branch of
right,
Tata Group, where they were like, hey, we need to ride the wave.
right,
And then you had HCL, you had
yeah,
Wipro, and all of them.
yeah,
And then you had large companies based out of America wanting to create an engineering team here,
yeah,
which is Adobe, Amazon, and
yeah,
things. I think I was the when Amazon created the Chennai office.
right.
I was like the first batch.
Mhm.
This is like 10 years ago or like
Yeah,
12 years
12,
ago
yeah,
or 14 years ago.
14.
Yeah, I keep lowering that for whatever reason. I don't want to feel like it's been
Too
that
old.
long. Yeah. um or actually the reason is I think I wanted to achieve more. That's probably the reason why I think I'm lowering. Less about like feeling old. I think like everyone ages. The and now we've moved more into creating product companies that are
Yeah,
just for India, as well
yeah,
as like creating product companies
mm,
across the globe.
yeah,
So that's like a pretty massive shift
right,
from like manufacturing to IT services
right,
to large MNCs
right,
creating engineering organizations and like creating
right,
product companies out of here that can serve globally.
yeah,
And now, as well as like locally in India. So I think the shift is happening.
yeah,
Certainly think the shift is happening. In terms of the Bay Area thing, I think partly part of the ecosystem that makes it really good is certainly the people.
yeah,
Um, when you have people who have experienced different things. I think like if you've been in OpenAI for the last 2 years, I think that's like the amount of learnings that you would have had is like an equivalent of 10 years in relative to the growth that they've had. And suddenly you have like 500 people who have like such a wide variety of experience right there, who are all
right,
going to start a company or you're going to recruit.
right,
And I think that is certainly an important ingredient which is hard to replicate,
right,
as long as you unless like you have more successful companies. But
right,
I think the trajectory of where India companies are growing and evolving is pretty fascinating.
right. No, I think it's pretty. So the kind of work that has been happening in India, which is in some of the examples probably the largest scale in the world. The Zomato, the Swiggy of the
Yeah.
world, and
Yeah.
you are headed to Swiggy. Next,
Yeah.
the Hotstar, the
Yeah.
scale at which Hotstar operates, the scale at which Swiggy operates.
Yeah.
All of this is probably the largest in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the kind of often it gets hidden that how much deep tech goes behind just a Swiggy order.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So Vivek, like the early journey, the company found the product market fit. It was clear that there are companies willing to paying customer post YC or Series A done. Uh, and I think if I now again zoom out a little bit, right? The problem HackerRank is solving is how to identify the high quality tech talent in the needle in the haystack, right? Uh, what have been your observations, that what have been historically, what have been the process to do that? And I think more importantly, I would probe you on what, in your belief, are the wrong ways to find a person
Mm-hmm.
for tech.
Yeah.
And then what inputs you have received, because I'm sure you, your team, you would interact at a very high frequency with people who are making the hiring decisions, who are making the talent strategy for large organizations, the Microsoft, the Googles of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your insights from there?
Yeah. Maybe there are a few things. I don't have like a perfect frame for all of them
Mhm,
because they might be in different directions. So I'll
mhm,
start in no particular order. The first one is uh, I've realized that there is no global best developer.
mhm.
uh, Actually, there is no perhaps global best person in
Yeah,
anything, like in the
yeah,
sense of,
yeah.
I think Zuckerberg will be a pretty bad CEO for Oracle,
Sure, for certain.
and Larry Ellison will be a pretty bad CEO for
For Facebook.
Meta. So the key is it matter. So whenever we even like think about like needle in a haystack, it's almost like
Right.
everybody is trying to find the same needle in the haystack,
Mm,
when you need to determine what works for you
yeah,
and then determine who's the right fit. So I
yeah.
think the right fit matters more than like kind of like a global ranking. Even though we call HackerRank, it is more about like how can we rank the best fit for your
Yeah.
organization as opposed to something like a
So it's
global
not
one.
one linear ranking, but
Yeah,
it's like there are probably 1,000 different kind of needles
yeah,
that need to be
exactly.
disclosed.
And
So the
and
complexity is actually another level.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not just finding needle in the haystack, but finding the right needle in the
yeah,
haystack.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it varies for every
Mm,
company, and you need to be clear as an organization in terms of what you're trying to optimize
mhm,
for
mhm.
and determine based on that. So that's
Right.
probably one
Sure.
general aspect
Sure.
to think about. The second one is so your interview process is the best proxy that people actually use, and for your first and your interview process also needs to evolve depending upon the size of the organization. If you're starting off and you want to hire your first 10 people or 15 people, I think you can afford to take an excruciatingly long time in a good way, like literally ask them to come to office,
Right.
work with them for like a week or 2 weeks and things on those lines and work them.
Right.
But it's not going to scale if you're going to like hire 100 people,
Right.
then nobody's going to like work with you for like a week. So we got to think about the interview process also evolving based upon the size of the organization, based upon like how your company is evolving. It can't be like a one size fits all across the board.
Makes sense.
um, the third one, just on the same thing in terms of like the interview process, is if you look at least like the tech interview process, it started off with people asking questions like, "Hey, how many golf balls fit in a
Yeah.
747?"
Yeah.
And developers never really understood like, "Hey, why are you asking me about this stuff?" Although it was posed as a critical thinking question and things, and then it evolved more into, okay, write code.
Mhm.
I got my job at Amazon writing code on a piece of
Right.
paper and
Mhm.
like somebody actually
Mhm.
evaluating. Which we digitized at
Mhm.
HackerRank. He
Mhm.
started to write like basic
Right.
algorithms, data structures, stuff on online IDE.
Right.
Now it is getting more and more towards real world problems or
Right.
like maybe toy projects.
Right.
And I think over time it's going to resemble what you do in a day-to-day task as well. So the third aspect in terms of the interview process that I would share is the interview process needs to resemble as much
The
as
real
your
world.
real work, because that would be the best proxy that
Yeah.
you can have.
Yeah.
um, the fourth point I would share is, somebody said this, maybe it was Ben Horowitz, I don't remember, but hire for strength, but not lack of weakness. And I think it's an important one. I've noticed this a lot whenever we do a debrief,
Mhm.
which is we always say, yeah, he was good, but he had these flaws
Mhm.
or she had these flaws.
Mhm.
And then like people will immediately pile on, oh yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I
Mhm.
noticed that as well.
Mhm.
That's a big flaw. And
Mhm.
then like the debrief will go astray.
Yeah.
When the key is to know that every human has a flaw. Every person has a large flaw. The key is like, what is a superpower? Now,
Right.
of course, if your flaws um, uh, are going to be things that are non-negotiables. Okay, you're like a real jerk. You've had like a criminal record in the
Yes.
past and things on the sense.
Right.
Okay, those things are like non-negotiable. But everybody has flaws. So the key
Right.
is to make sure that you're clear on the superpower and like hire for
Yeah.
strengths than lack of
I
weakness.
think that's a very insightful point, and I think it would be helpful to stress more on that.
Yeah,
That generally, in most of the hiring process, even for the senior roles, and I can relate with that. That it's a checklist. That these are four checklists. Is he
yeah,
weak on any of these? If he's weak, reject,
yeah,
and if not, let's hire.
yeah,
people generally not talk about what are the biggest strength that this person
Exactly.
brings in,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
that can probably
Yeah.
overpower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, like, I mean, this is like a little bit of an experiment that we're doing internally at
Mhm,
HackerRank. We'll see
mhm.
how well it works. Every job description in HackerRank, hopefully when this podcast goes live, will have a superpower.
Mhm.
Like, are you the world class at this one? I'm
Can you
viewing
demonstrate that on this you have a spike?
exactly,
You're really good
exactly,
at
yeah.
this. Hmm.
And in fact, so much so that I would really wish the debriefs were this person is heavily flawed in these angles,
Mm.
but has exhibited such a dramatic spike in
Right,
this particular dimension
right,
that is aligned to what we are looking for. So we should actually go and
right,
hire. So I'm thinking HackerRank more as a collection of experts where you
right,
have one superpower on like enterprise sales, one person
right,
who's like the best in front end design, and things on
right,
those lines. So
right.
so that's like a that's another thing that we're really pushing through. Um, and the other one is, I mean, like everybody, maybe the last one, and we can like dive into any of these aspects. When we think about culture fit, it's always viewed as like it's always glossed over
Mhm.
as this thing about, okay, this is this is just like an HR round.
Yeah,
They're just going to ask like,
yeah,
hey, tell me about yourself
yeah.
or whatever, and uh, I think of I think maybe Peter Thiel talked about this in terms of like um, every company has like a cult like vibe
Mhm,
in it,
mhm.
and you stand for something. Like Amazon stands for frugality and customer
Right,
obsession.
right,
Um, and certainly OpenAI stands in terms of like, hey, making it very clear our mission is to build safe AGI across the board. Every company stands for something, has like a clear mission and has like a clear set of values. And I think the culture fit is more in terms of how much do you really subscribe to the mission
right,
and how much do you subscribe to the values,
right,
making it very clear that there is no right or wrong in terms of values. there's there's only like, this is what we stand for. Are you willing to join our movement or not? That's
right,
about it. You can completely say, this I don't subscribe to this.
right,
And that doesn't make the company bad.
right,
It just means that you're not bought into those particular values.
right,
So understanding the value fit or the culture fit is as critical as like determining the superpowers and how you interview. Yeah, those are like some of the things that I've observed really really great companies do. So which is like, if I had to like summarize, you interview for superpowers, your interview process mimics as much very close to the real world, and you take the culture fit very seriously to see if the person subscribes to your mission and values.
right. Makes sense. You talked a little bit about that, on HackerRank, you envision a future where there are people who are, say, fantastic at enterprise sales. There's someone who is, say, fantastic at designing high quality product experiences, and then someone who is just a cracked data scientist with deep command on
Yeah,
reinforcement learning,
yeah,
right? Now, one subset of it are very objectively, can be evaluated very objectively, right? Whether someone is really good at, say, machine learning algorithms or not.
hmm,
But on the other hand, whether someone is a great enterprise salesperson or not is so far, at least so far, if I say look back, have not been very easy to evaluate on in an objective manner,
yeah,
right? And in that context, there's also an interesting inflection point of AI that's happening,
hmm,
because now some of these could potentially be more subjective capabilities, could also be evaluated. Um, so there have been one historical way of evaluating people for fitment. How do you see that going forward, and particularly in the context of this whole AI evolution that's happening?
yeah. At HackerRank, we think about the future as human plus AI. That
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm,
that's our operating mindset in terms of
mm-hmm.
like how we think about it, and
Right.
specifically when it comes to software development. I think software development has changed. I wouldn't even say it's changing.
It
It's like
has changed
fundamentally
already,
changed,
indeed.
and it's pretty amazing to see the way interns develop stuff versus experienced people.
Mm-hmm,
That it almost like, now it's the reverse mentoring.
mm-hmm,
Like we're literally doing reverse mentoring. I'm having a workshop maybe today or tomorrow, like an intern demonstrating this is how I built to all the senior engineers, because
mm-hmm.
it's fundamentally very different. Like
Yeah.
when I actually saw the intern build, like, the first thing that he opened an IDE of Cursor, but he didn't go into the code
Mm-hmm,
editor.
mm-hmm,
The first thing he did was on Cursor Composer
mm-hmm,
to attach the relevant files and say, do this.
mm-hmm.
That was like a little bit of an aha
Yeah.
of like, hey, that is not my first action always when I'm trying to code. Like I'll open an IDE and like start coding,
Yeah.
and this is your first action. This is
Right.
literally your first action in
Right.
terms of like looking at it and reviewing. So I think we think about the future as human plus AI, and certainly the software development has changed quite a bit. So to your earlier question of the whole enterprise sales, like can you objectively evaluate or not? I do think there are ways that you can objectively
Mhm.
evaluate. Like if you're the best person in enterprise sales, I actually think you can actually do that for any field. But I think what is more important, in my opinion, is the thought process that you're actually going to look for this in the
Mhm.
hiring process.
Mhm.
That actually is a cultural change
Mhm.
that now people are getting oriented to.
Right.
I'm going to hire for strengths
Right.
and I'm going to be okay with the flaws, but I'm going to focus an inordinate amount to make sure that this person is a real spike
Mhm.
in this particular dimension. I think the thought process carries much more weight,
Right.
more than the how do you
The how
objectively
of that,
evaluate.
that how do you do
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
although like I don't want to
Because
diminish
that's
the
always
importance of it.
findable. That's
Yeah,
always doable.
yeah,
Might be slightly complex, but
yeah,
it's doable.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
don't want to, again, like I don't want to diminish the importance,
Yeah.
but cultural changes happen with thought processes.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right. Uh, one double click on and like please be as don't worry about it being controversial.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think are the biggest mistake that most tech companies do when hiring, apart from looking for flaws and not spikes? And
Mm.
this more focused on, let's say, a junior or mid-level software engineering role, a fresh grad or someone with few years of experience. What common mistake do you see companies doing when they're hiring?
Yeah, yeah. So
And like, what's your thing to the hiring managers? Please don't do this. I'm frustrated with this.
um, I think most companies, um, maybe it started with Microsoft of the whole critical thinking
Mm-hmm,
process,
mm-hmm,
the golf ball
mm-hmm,
747.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think there's a book, How Do You Move Mount
Right,
Fuji?
right.
Very, very popular. And I think Google and Microsoft was starting this, but like Google really popularized the whole notion of data structures and
Right.
algorithms because they were indexing the entire web.
Yeah.
So you better write the
You better be good at
yeah,
it.
better be good at it. At least that was your core
Yeah.
core product back then.
Yeah.
But I think like every other tech company has just adopted the same
Yeah.
interview style,
Yeah.
and there is I can understand why. Hey, Google has really good engineers.
Yeah.
This is their interview process. Let me actually go ahead and like
And if it
copy.
is working for them, it must work for
Exactly.
me. Yeah.
But I think there's a flaw in the argument, or a flaw in the analogy a little bit in terms of okay, but you're not working in the same problems as
Yeah.
Google. You're working on different kinds of problems.
Your needle is different from what the needle for Google is.
Exactly, exactly. And so I think like that blind copy
Yeah.
of the hiring process has yeah, that's probably the biggest flaw I think like most tech companies make. And I think what that has led to is the rise of um, the lead codings of the
Right.
world.
The over indexing on
Oh,
just,
yeah,
building that muscle.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, over indexing on that. And
While that's important, I would not diminish the importance of being a good problem solver, but you
yeah,
can't just over index on that.
absolutely. By the way,
Yeah.
I still strongly believe, I know like AI is getting better. It can solve most of the lead code problems. It can solve a good bunch of HackerRank problems and things of those lines. And there is a notion of, oh, if AI can solve, why do you even need to know it? I actually think the stronger your fundamentals
Yeah.
are, the better you can be an expert.
Right. Right.
You may not necessarily need to know how to construct a red black tree,
Yeah.
but if you don't know what the complexity of the code is,
Right.
whether it's an n square or an n cube,
Right.
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
So I do think there is a place for you to understand the fundamentals, understand like code, understand how to optimize, even though AI can do a lot of those things.
Right.
But yeah, but there's absolutely a place, but I think we've gone too far.
Right. Makes sense. Uh, and then let's come to the inflection point. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on AI? And no podcast is complete without that. So how and like at least I have very strong beliefs. Most people have that software engineering is changing in very fundamental ways.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. To begin with, I would ask you that a lot of people say that like if AI can write code, what would even engineers do?
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
We think about this. We think about this a lot, obviously, and like things are changing and evolving very rapidly. I'll give you an analogy of the pilot, or the evolution of aviation,
Mm-hmm.
the aviation industry. In the 1930s, there were four people in the cockpit. You had a pilot, you had a co-pilot, you had a flight engineer, you had a navigator. As AI got better, I think in the 1960s, the navigator was optional.
Navigation technology.
Yeah, no, the four people, the navigator role
Mm-hmm.
in the cockpit was optional. Like you didn't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And as AI got better, like flight engineer was optional.
Mm.
And today you have the pilot, just a pilot and the
Often
co-pilot.
it's just a pilot and a co-pilot, and that's just for
And
redundancy, actually.
90% of your flight is flown by AI.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can put anybody in the pilot seat.
Right.
You are still assessing people.
Right.
By the way, the pilot, if you look at the pilot's interview process, pretty fascinating for what it's worth. There's one aspect that has remained consistent across decades, even though technology has changed, which is your knowledge of the fundamentals of aeronautical engineering.
And fluid dynamics.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's like still multiple choice questions, which we can talk about that
So I did
later.
a course on paragliding,
Oh, okay.
and I what I realized is that 1 week of it was just classes,
Uh-huh.
learning the Bernoulli's theorem
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
fluid
yeah.
dynamics at core again, and it's
Yeah,
necessary.
yeah,
Interesting is that it's necessary to
yeah.
learn that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I think about like software engineering as well, I think of it as like the one aspect is I do think like fundamentals. And by the way, I think about software engineering, but this is true for any profession. The fundamentals of the profession, you need to be
Right.
the more you are a master of the fundamentals,
Yeah.
the more you can be a master in like the expert topics or like how to even use these tools to make it
Yeah.
better. So I think like the fundamentals are needed. You need to continue to work on. The second aspect I think about it is I think there's a difference between programming and software development,
Mm-hmm.
which people often use interchangeably.
Right.
Programming is I give you a spec in natural language, in English, whatever, and you're converting it into a programming language of your choice.
Right.
Go, Python, Ruby, whatever it is. Software development, on the other hand, encompasses a whole set of other things. It is the ability to architect well, such that you're not over engineering for V1, but it's extensible enough for you to build V2. Ability for you to make sure your software works across all scenarios. Ability to make it accessible, ability to make it responsive. And by the way, AI will help in all of these aspects and may even do all of these aspects. But somebody needs to know that, hey, you need to do all of these things, and somebody needs to verify whether it's being done in this way. So I think you're going to see high quality of software in general getting built. You're going to see the craft aspect of software developers getting elevated. So AI is going to give more leverage, and like whenever I hear like this whole, and obviously this is the one that makes social media go rounds. AI is replace developers. It's going to be doomsday. Stop coding. It's the worst advice. In fact, I'll tell you a counterpoint to this, a more data-driven counterpoint.
Yeah.
GitHub put up the chart of the number of developers. I think GitHub is the largest developer community. They reached 150 million recently, and the graph from 100 million to 150 million, which is the time when ChatGPT and cursors and AI agents of the world was the steepest.
Right.
So the counterpoint is as the graph gets steeper as AI adoption actually increases.
Right.
Very different from whatever you see and hear on social media.
Right.
So I think, I think the job is going to change. It's going to give people more leverage. I think you're going to talk about the craft of building things that's going to get elevated much more. And I think, if you're a developer who understands the fundamentals and knows how to orchestrate the system, boy, your leverage is like 10, 100x more than what it was like 5 years ago.
Right. So I think to distill that, 2 points. One is that a good software engineer might be much more capable, much more impactful when they can leverage all the tools. Right?
Yeah.
The way like earlier we have 4 pilots flying a plane, and now today it's just 1 probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this ratio might be even more stark in the world of software engineering.
Yeah.
And the second is that the entry barrier to build things is also going to reduce massively.
Yeah.
Because until now, to build something, you have to, jump through so many hoops. You learn compiler, you learn syntax, you learn all of that. Now probably it's all, the AI can do that for you.
Yeah.
So the number of people who are building software might explode massively.
Yeah.
And the people who are really good at it might probably create 10x, 100x more value than they do today.
Yeah. Like every technology democratizes things.
Yeah.
So I do think AI is going to make that happen as well. The one thing I am a little skeptical, I'm like 50-50 on, is all of these apps that are, hey, type it in English and it generates the
Build me an app.
And that's the best way to learn to code. I'm not really sure.
Yes.
Works well for demo, certainly gets the hype on social media. But I'm not sure if that's the best way for you to learn to code.
Yeah.
I think like you can certainly learn to code with an AI tutor. I mean, like when I learned to code, when I got stuck in a bug, it was like, oh, go to Google search, like
Yeah.
search for it, Stack Overflow, or call Hari or Prasanna,
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
help me
Yeah.
debug on all
And we
these
were
things.
lucky to be at those places.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So now you'd have like an AI tutor who's like
Right.
going to be a super expert. So you can
Right.
certainly learn through that.
Right.
Can you actually learn through just like, hey, build this app and it spits out a bunch of things that you don't even understand what the syntax is and you're like constantly prodding back and forth? I don't know. I'm like 50-50.
No,
I'm a
I'm
little
with you on
skeptical on
that.
that.
I'm with you
Yeah.
on that.
Because
And
there was
another,
also this period, I'm sure you remember this. Um, by the way, this whole I don't know what people have against developers. I know they're a little bit high maintenance, like, they're like, whatever, the coddled a little bit in most tech companies. But there used to be this 2017, 2018 no code,
yeah,
no
yeah. Oh
code, low
dear.
code movement
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of,
Why do you need
yeah,
developers?
it's the same thing. The no code, low code is like, hey, you just like, I'm building all of these apps without any code. You don't need developers anymore. It's the same thing. There's something about like people wanting to whatever attack developers.
Yeah.
Maybe it's they're coddled a lot, they're paid a lot. By the way, all of those things are mostly true in many companies.
Yeah.
But I think like in this one, it's just going to give people more leverage, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to elevate the craft of
Yeah.
building software.
Yeah. I remember on this no code, low code time, we were just kind of getting started with Scalar and InterviewBait, and I was meeting a gentleman, and he said that, okay, sure, you teach coding, but why do you need to teach
Yeah,
coding? Now
exactly.
I have this no
Yeah,
code tool, I can drag drop and build a website.
yeah, yeah,
Why
yeah.
do I need developers?
Yeah, yeah.
And I
It
think the
was a
world
big
has,
one. Like people
yeah,
actually forgot about it. Like,
yeah,
it was a big one.
yeah,
I remember because in 2018 when we raised the CDC round, this was one of the questions from investors.
yeah,
Will developers even like exist in the future? Like no code, low code is a big thing. And I had to put that as like one of the whatever risks in the presentation. After that I deleted it because like, oh no, I think that's a
you don't
stupid
want to
question.
depend
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. I think that's a stupid question. That's like a red herring that I don't want to get trapped in.
Yeah,
But like people don't remember that was like a big deal. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So double clicking further on the AI, right? In a world where, you know, the AI is gonna be a very big co-pilot in a way, right? How do you think the hiring process would evolve as well?
Yeah. So I think of it as in two aspects. One is the the ability for you to understand the fundamentals is pretty critical. And when I say fundamentals, the ability, like even the way that we are changing the take-home assessments.
Yeah,
So we're like completely changing it, which is right now when you think about like a take-home assessment, even on HackerRank, it is okay. You write code, it tests for correctness, tests for efficiency, and you're good to
yeah,
go. But like AI can do a bunch of
all of that.
those aspects.
Yeah. So I'll share something. So
Yeah.
recently, a lot of employers, many of them very good friends, who come to hire from Skillr School of Technology.
Uh,
Recently, I was talking to a CTO, and I asked them that why don't you just ask kids to build a project, let them submit it, and you can see some whoever is building it the
yeah.
best. You can maybe interview them.
Yeah.
He said, it's very high noise now because the assignment they can just upload in
Yeah.
ChatGPT, give me whatever it has given back, and I
Yeah.
don't know that, and like if I review it, it's great, it's
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
but it does not mean that the person is the
Yeah.
right fit.
Yeah.
While like this is while aligned to the idea that ask them to do something they need to do at the work,
Yeah.
but that still got invalidated because I
Yeah.
can get it done without having to do anything.
Yeah. But there are like lots of nuances on that. I'll say like a couple of things. One is in the real world work, you rarely start with a blank
Yeah,
repository or a
yeah,
blank code. You
yeah,
always like have something existing.
yeah,
So there's like and the way that, so that's what I was about to say, like the take home assessments, there are a few ways that we are redefining that. One is the type of problems, like how do you get closer and closer to real world, like actually
right,
give them a code repository and say, okay, go ahead and like learn how this code repository even functions using
yeah,
AI. You
yeah,
can say like, hey,
yeah,
tell me all of these things. And then typically what do you get? You are fixing a bug, you get a support ticket, and now you need to clarify
yeah,
with the person who submitted the
right,
support ticket.
right,
Can you actually clarify with an AI here?
right,
Or you get a PRD. And most product managers, except for HackerRank, if they're watching it, don't write good PRDs. They actually say like, hey, do this.
hmm.
Okay, what? Tell me more detail. Like,
Yeah,
do you have a
yeah,
spec?
yeah,
Can you actually clarify that?
yeah,
So the one aspect of HackerRank, the way take home is evolving, is more and more towards like real world.
yeah,
The other aspect is what are you evaluating the person on? Is right now predominantly, right now the industry is on like, can you write correct and efficient code? But there are aspects in terms of thought process why did you choose to accept this suggestion from AI?
Yeah.
Is an important one. Like,
Yeah.
tell me more.
Yeah.
Of course, you can also prompt that to the AI, say like, hey,
Right.
tell me more.
Sure.
But we can build guardrails around
Right.
that. So how do you evolve the evaluation parameters beyond just the correctness and efficiency, which is, did you actually write unit
The
tests?
process. Yeah.
Yeah, without even me prompting.
Yeah.
Like, did you even like think about it?
Yeah.
Did you even think about accessibility is an
Right.
important one? Did you even
Right.
think about response? By the way, you can use AI to do all of these
Right.
things, but did
Right.
you even think?
But are
Or
you asking the right questions to the
exactly,
AI?
exactly.
Yeah.
And are you? And why are you accepting or rejecting
Hmm.
certain
Hmm.
suggestions that are given by AI? Those things are much more interesting and valuable inputs in
Right.
terms of like determining the new age developer skills. So
Right.
that's how I think the interview process, everything is going to evolve, and like we're really pushing through. We call it internally as next gen hiring.
Yeah.
And to the completely, I don't know if it's the other end of the spectrum or like maybe in a different dimension, but like in the same umbrella of next gen, there are also integrity issues that you need to like that you need to tackle.
Right.
Are you the person who you said you are?
Right.
We had an intern who said like, hey, here are all the ways that you can game an online assessment. I was like blown away. Boy, like,
Yeah.
you guys are like just like
Yeah.
on top of
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
in terms of like how you can have a different camera
Yeah.
feed,
Yeah.
how you can like ask help from external
Yeah.
sources without it
Yeah.
being detected.
Yeah.
So also those aspects have changed quite a bit.
So the proctoring has to kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like, are you really following the
Yeah.
rules set
Yeah.
by the company or not?
Yeah.
So I think there are aspects like we need to like, and that's what we think about it as like beginner's mindset. Have a clean slate. If you were to build HackerRank right now, how would you construct the hiring process,
Mm.
and how would you construct the integrity of the solution given all the things that are going on, so that you can get a really good signal on the candidate and something that the employer can really trust?
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. No, very nuanced and very
Yeah.
detailed, Vivek. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure the podcast was at least very insightful for me.
Okay.
Uh, I'm sure a lot of work ahead for you and your team
Yeah.
to build these solutions that in the new world of AI, how the highest quality talent gets identified.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm looking forward to see what you all are building.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, this is the first time I'm here in the Scalar office. It's not even an office, right? It's a university. It's
It's a
like,
whole campus. Yeah,
yeah, it's a campus. Pretty amazing, whatever you've done. Say hello to Anshu,
for sure.
and super, super good to see what you guys have done. And yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, looking forward to building some great things together.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Thank
cool,
you,
cool.
Vivek.
Thank you.